All right, Shell. We are back and we are in the middle of chapter 8, talking about the importance of elevating one's soul and character. So before we finish the chapter this week, I want to zoom out for a second and kind of put things into perspective. One of the ploys of the Yetzer Hara is to try to allow you to make things as if they don't matter so significantly. And I think that's zooming out for a moment and looking at things in a broader perspective and asking the question of what are we doing here? It's important. There are definitely times of year that like beg of us to do that, like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, where like we're forced into this place of introspection and saying like, what am I doing here ultimately? When you go through and you look at it in the most simplest of terms, reading, let's say, you learn Mesilas Yesharim chapter 1, the avoida that a man has in this world. And he breaks it down so very simply that why God brings us to this world and what our job is here and what our tasks are here. And very simply, that the Yetzer Hara, is it good or is it bad? Really, the Yetzer Hara is good, right? It wants to destroy you, but it's an Eved Hashem. Hashem put the Yetzer Hara in you with a job to do, to try to detract, to try to mess you up and destroy you. So that way, at the end of your life, you're losing out merit. But Al Pi Hashem, that's literally how the system is set up to be. When a person has the proper perspective and they look at life and they don't forget what the point of life is, then their decisions start to become a lot easier. They're able to look at their Yetzer Hara in the face and simply say, "You're trying to destroy me, and I'm not going to allow you to destroy me. I'm going to stay laser focused and locked in on what I'm supposed to be doing." It is so easy to turn your mind off and just not think of the bigger picture and not allow yourself to get deep like that because it's just more comfortable. You don't have to think about those things. But it's important that we always find a way to maintain that perspective so we don't get lost in the sauce, so to speak. And elevating one's character is the prerequisite because it's what's building us into the Kli that we are. Right? If the Torah and Kedusha is water, then we have to work on building our Kli because that's what's going to hold it and retain it. The work that we do on ourselves, the investment we make on ourselves and working on ourselves will in turn lead to a better life and it will also lead to being successful in a purpose and why Hashem put us here. A person who is, let's say, disciplined and not jealous and has good work ethic and they don't get angry and they're more giving and they worked on themselves, they're going to be in a better position to do their purpose. They're going to be more refined to fight against the Yetzer Hara, right? The Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. They're two lions inside a person. Which one wins? Whichever one you feed, whichever one you give into. So if you live a life constantly giving into your Yetzer Hara, you're feeding it, it's becoming stronger, more powerful. And then when you want to try to stand up to it, and in the moment of inspiration, do something good, you'll be spiritually underdeveloped. You'll fall apart in 3 seconds. Because in the infancy stages of you trying to fight against and condition yourself with strength to fight against the Yetzer Hara, you're not going to have that strength because you never worked on yourself. So I want to just, again, looking at the bigger picture, the bigger perspective. So much of what, we have to get ourselves juiced up and like motivated and inspired and stuff like that. It's just to remind us to get back on track. So last week we spoke about the two different elements, the value of inspiration, why getting ourselves inspired is so important. We have a Shabbaton this weekend, and for a lot of people, the reason that they don't come to these Shabbatons is because they don't feel inspired anymore. And it's such a loss to the Yetzer Hara because the way to feel inspired again is by coming to the Shabbaton, and it doesn't make any sense. The value of inspiration gives the person the ability and strength and motivation to do what they should be doing, what they want to do, and what they know is right, ultimately. The second was Kedusha, to increase Kedusha, to be able to like to create myself into a mikdash, meaning that I'm becoming a dwelling place for Hashem by increasing the Kedusha and moving out the schmutz. He said earlier in the book, you're going to usher a king into a room when it's a dirty room. What are you doing? Right? And even if you clean the room, there's no nice furniture. There's no like you have to, you know, sumer avi asay tov. So you add Kedusha into your life because then you're able to feel God a lot more. God will be more present in an area, in a space where you create space for God to dwell and exist. But if you have going in your eyes and your ears and coming out your mouth, nothing but schmutz and tuma, how it's not just going to happen on its own. It's a partnership over here, right? If it's date night for your beloved and your significant other, and you guys are supposed to go out at 8, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't make any reservations and I lent the car out and we don't have a babysitter. You're like, what do you like? How do you expect this to be a magical night when you didn't do any of the preparation? Person wants to have a connection with Hashem. What are you doing for that? How are you increasing Kedusha? Are you bringing God into your life? Those are the two things that obviously a person can do to experience and feel Hashem and be in a good position to be able to take on more stuff. So this chapter is really chizuk. It's just it's him just giving some motivation and perspective in all of this. So we no, sorry. We're on page 169, we're at the top of the page over here. Here we go. So but Moshe Rabbeinu didn't merely say that Hashem is the God in heaven above, he also said on the earth below, and there is none other. Right? Ein oid milvadoi. Rak gam mitochas ein oid.
We did that paragraph.
We did?
Yeah, we finished with that one.
Uh,
The bottom paragraph is where we left off.
okay, tov. And there's a room for foreign gods who the subject is. Okay, yes, correct. Right? And we like foreign gods basically saying that if you're not serving Hashem, you're serving something else, right? At the end of every decision, if you go down that rabbit hole, you're either serving Hashem or you're giving allegiance to something or someone else, right? So that's ultimately God has to be number one in all times. This is then the fundamental issue, to rid yourself of foreign gods of the Yetzer Hara, because the Yetzer Hara, I wouldn't say what the connection he's making, but not outright like, oh, we're worshiping the Yetzer Hara. But the Yetzer Hara is what lures us into worshiping foreign gods. Now, no one's bowing down the trees or sheep anymore. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about giving your life to other things. For example, if a person is seamlessly chasing money because they want to be comfortable, right, then they are worshiping the god of money, because anything that the money dictates them to do is what they're ultimately going to do. If they want fame and fortune and power, whatever it is that they want, then they're giving themselves to service towards that thing, and that thing is ultimately dictating what their life is. We'll talk about freedom, right? You're going to talk about on Pesach, what are you free from? What are the things that enslave you? Well, no one's locked up behind, right? They say the iPhone puts you in the cage that no one can see. It's what is forcing you, so to speak, and driving you to do the things that you do. That becomes your master. It should only be Hashem and nothing else. So the Yetzer Hara is going to find any given thing of the day to have a person try to worship. Not that we're demanding you to rid it all at once. It's impossible to wake up one bright morning and suddenly find yourself completely cleansed and pure. But at least you can start working. You must start. But you must also devote yourself entirely to the task. It's like a king whose enemy managed to worm his way into the royal palace and settle down there. And the minister in charge of the palace wouldn't try as hard as he could with all of his might to throw out the enemy. The king is not going to become angry with him or desert him. Dr. Shelley. On the contrary, the king will help his ministers in his struggle and hurry to re-inhabit every room from the enemy and push back. But if the minister slacks off and doesn't ever put up a fight, and even worse, if the king senses that the minister secretly resigns himself to the situation and begins to obey the enemy, then the king's anger will flare up against him. He will chastise him and say, "You lowly traitor, not only have you given my home over to the enemy, but you made it peace with him. How dare you deceive me and tell me that I am your king and that you are my subject?" Now it's intense, but let's like really think about this, okay? Let's use an example of a person's home. We're tasked to get married and build a bias Nema B'Yisrael, right? We're supposed to build a house of God in the house that we live in and raise our children in a state of Kedusha. Now, imagine you then make your place a feeding ground for the Yetzer Hara. You fill your home with things of schmutz. You allow impurities to reign forth in your house, right? And again, like I don't need to describe in detail unless you need me to of what that looks like, but to create a makom kadosh of what comes in here and what we're allowed to have in here. If you walk into someone's living room, just by an example, and on the living room is a stack of these like People magazines, like these celebrity trash magazines that you have in Winn-Dixie and Publix on the checkout, and like that is the content in their living room. They are making the epicenter of their house the biggest schmutz, tuma, and evil like possible, and their kids are around it and soaking it in. The impact that that's having is absolute toxicity. And so Hashem is now saying, okay, I brought you to this world. I brought you to this world to be a servant for me. And what's happening over here? What's happening is that not only Are you no longer fighting the Yetzer Hara? You're coming to peace with it. You're coming to terms with it. You're allowing its survival. You're joining it. Excuse me, God says. He turns around and says, "How dare you? That's absolute. You're a traitor. How can you do such a thing?" And that's ultimately how we have to look at our lives as well. If there's a purpose and a goal that we're trying to achieve, and then we turn around and we devote our time and attention to the things that are the antithesis of God, we're not in good shape. We can't do that. We have to look at our lives like that with that level of introspection. Just by means of an example as well, to understand the Yetzer Hara, you can look at today's modern conflict, and just by means of example. There are people coming out and in the war against Iran, and they're saying to themselves, oh, we destroyed their enemy, we destroyed their navy, and we took out their nuclear program, and we degraded their missile capability. So a senator literally was out there, we could declare victory and we could go home. We were successful in our objectives. And it's such a foolish thing because even the last 12-day war, and similar to what's going on in Gaza, is that you're dealing with an ideology that's cancerous and is similar to the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara does not stop and give up. So as long as there is life, as long as there is breathing, as long as they have the ability to do, they are never going to stop. It's not like you destroy their whole army and they say, okay, great, so now we'll rebuild. And in 30 years from now, we'll do this all again. They're never going to stop. Absolute victory means total death, destruction, gone. They don't exist because they will never stop. That is their mandate. That is what they are living for. And death is not as important to them as the mission at hand. The same with the Yetzer Hara. It's not like, oh, I worked on myself. I'm a great person. My Yetzer Hara is going to go to schluff. That's okay. I can be lenient on the things that I took upon myself because at the end of the day, look, I degraded the Yetzer Hara's ability. This is the type of person that's stupid. The Yetzer Hara will never give up trying to destroy you. That is literally they're hell bent on it. That is what it's designed to do. It was mandated by God, and that it's never going to stop and quit. And therefore, a person always has to make sure that they are playing offense and defense effectively. They are preparing themselves, they are setting up boundaries for themselves. There are things that they'll never do or places they'll never go, or I will make sure in my home X, Y, and Z. I'll make sure for myself. I'll never give up this or entertain that. That's the approach. That's the way that a person has to fight the Yetzer Hara. I have no doubt, and it's a lifelong battle. It's not like, oh, I woke up one day and it's gone. That's what he's saying. It's a lifelong battle. I have no doubt that you understood this parable on your own. Your body and soul are Hashem's palace in which he resides. But Hashem's enemy, the foreign god that is your Yetzer Hara, has managed to sneak in and take up residence within you. Now you can try to imagine how angry the master of the world would be if he were to see that you, the minister of his palace, has not only the enemy and foreign god to make himself at home, but has come to terms with him to the point where you defer to him and obey to him. What can Hashem possibly make up of a person who knows eating kosher is not right and does it anyway? What is Hashem to think? Like you're playing chess now with the enemy? Like you're hanging out and having a good time? In the wrath, he would say to you, you crooked traitor, how could you continue to try and trick me by saying, blessed are you, Hashem our God? Therefore, you begin to purify your thoughts and your midos so that they shouldn't become a muddy pit. Work with all your heart and make them holy. Establish Hashem's rulership over them so that all you do, say, and think will be in accordance with his words and his commandments. Now, again, you got to be normal. It's not going to happen overnight, but the fight is going. That's literally why you're here, right? Yeah, Bikesh Yaakov Leishe B'Shava. He wanted to sit Yaakov Avinu and chill, and Hashem turned around and said, "I'm sorry. You don't get to chill in this world. You're here in this world to work hard and to fight the Yetzer Hara. That's literally why you're here. Don't fold your arms and put your legs up. It's okay to have wins and losses. It's okay to chill out and to, again, if the person needs to watch a movie, obviously without foul language and images you shouldn't see, but okay, fine, because it's recharging you for something. But everything you do has to have purpose and meaning behind it. Can't forget, come to terms with it and say, oh, it's fine. Now I'm doing this. This is my hashkafa. It's nonsense. We have to always maintain that perspective and make sure that we are always growth oriented, always chipping away to try to be the better versions of ourselves because it's what we were put here to do. A Jew's whole ability to remove evil from his inner self, to transform his negative character into a positive one, and to make himself holy lies in the capacity for free choice that Hashem gives us. Animals are compelled by instinct in that they do in every aspect of their lives. There's no choice there. They're programmed to do it. But Hashem gave man the gift of choice in order for him to choose. between the path that is filled with life and God forbid the path that does not. Oh, sorry. And the merciful Father, he asks of every Jew in Devarim, a very famous pasuk in the Torah. Ubachartem b'chayim l'man tichya. And you should choose life so that you should live. Ubachartem b'chayim means that God gave a person the ability to choose life at all time. After 120, when you get up to Hashem and you're sitting in front of him and the minister of angels, and he looks at you and he says, yeah, what do you have to say for yourself? What finger are you going to point and at who? Whose fault was it that you took the foot off the gas? Again, in a normal, steady pace that a person can handle and not being a psychopath. But who are you going to point at to say it's their fault why I got comfortable? You see the irony that I want to be comfortable. It is literally comfort that's the enemy of your progress. It's literally comfort is the tool of the Yetzer Hara to destroy a human being because they take their gas off their foot off the gas, off the pedal. We can't have that. You have the ability to choose life at any time. That's what you're expected to do. But someone who wants to choose one of the two paths must first be above and outside them. As the Midrash says, fortunate is a person who is above his sin, and woe is the person whose sins are above him. Can a drunkard make the correct choice and decide to stop drinking while he is drunk? Maybe. What do you think, Danielle? Who could be capable of making a sound decision when his mind is chaotic and his emotions are stupefied by the influence of alcohol? Similarly, how can a person overcome himself and choose the path of Kedusha when his soul is inhabited by the baser instincts that pull him down? And his mind is plagued by the Yetzer Hara who tells him that bad is good and good is bad? It's impossible. A person is in it deep. So this is why, again, the importance of elevating your character, because if you want to be successful at your ultimate task, you have to be someone who has strength, who has character traits and core skills to be able to do that stuff. And it starts with how much you invest in yourself. If you invest in yourself to be an upstanding human being that has good work ethic, that is kind to others, that is has a proper moral compass, then you're going to be successful in serving Hashem. But when a person gives themselves the Yetzer Hara, some kid who just gives himself to every worldly pleasure and literally just lives his life following his heart's desires. What could be expected of such a person? They're drunk off their nihilism. Like they're so in it so deep and so far removed from the task that Hashem is asking of them. How is this person supposed to figure it out? They laugh and they mock the things that are serious. When you ask serious, deep questions, right, they make fun of it, they deflect it because it's not it's a joke to them. They're in that drunken state. They're not in a place where they're able to think rational. If we invest in ourselves and become the best that we can be, then when the time comes, ultimately, when it comes to make harder decisions and stuff, we'll be in a better position to be more successful. It is therefore imperative that for man to at least occasionally elevate himself above his misdeeds, his earthly desires, and his spiritual afflictions, indeed above the whole world. What he's saying is that this is the derech hateva. We are still inclined naturally to go along with certain things. As we know, right? Seven, six is nature, seven is Shabbos, eight is above nature. It supersedes it. It's really what where the yid is supposed to be. Our bodies and our nature tells us to act and do certain things. If you're hungry, go eat. It doesn't matter what the food is. And then Hashem comes along and asks us to elevate ourselves above that. Seemingly irrational, seemingly going against nature, right? When the body, you don't want to get up in the morning, and yet you rise out of bed like a lion. Why? Because Hashem, my master, told me to do so. I'm going above and beyond my nature. When I fast and deprive myself of food on Yom Kippur, because that's what Hashem asks of me to do, I am literally going above nature. And a person cannot do that if they're not powerful enough. It breaks my heart in the summer when we have Tisha B'Av in the summer. It's been, I don't know how many summers since we had Tisha B'Av, 2023 or four. I don't know. But it's heartbreaking. Now, again, not those who are so disconnected from their Judaism, they don't know what Tisha B'Av is. So, like, they're not going to fast. But the kids who do know that it's important to fast. And when you ask them, like, why, why do you have to eat? Because I'm hungry. And that's crazy. Bye, T. Good to see you. That's crazy that one of the most important days in the Jewish calendar, one of the most important days in the Jewish calendar, and you just have to eat because your body is demanding it of you. how lowly of the character. That a person who breaks Shabbos simply because they're bored and I want to keep Shabbos, but I break it because I just go on my phone. Why? Because I'm bored. That you can't sit in a in forget Kedusha. You can't just sit and like be with yourself, be with others for 24 hours because you're bored. This is a spiritually non-elevated person. They don't have the ability to be able to do like the basic things that God asks of them simply because of their weakened character. When a person works hard on themselves, when a person works on themselves, right, then they put themselves in a position to be successful and do the Ratzon Hashem. It's therefore imperative for man to, at least occasionally, elevate himself above his misdeeds, his earthly desires, and his spiritual afflictions, indeed, above the whole world. It is at that moment of spiritual elevation and purity that he sees and feels himself as a Jew who is close to Hashem. It is then that he views his childish exploits as nonsense and his Yetzer Hara and its drives as a conniving snake that will be ashamed of himself and will say, in fear, I can't believe how far I've sunken spiritually. In your state of spirituality. And I think, by the way, on Geula Shabbatons, on regional Shabbatons, that there's moments when a person is back in that environment that like when they're locked in at like a main event and they look at themselves and they're just like, what am I doing? It's like that moment of clarity. They elevate themselves spiritually above nature. And in that moment of inspiration, they're able to look at themselves and give themselves the proper mussar and say, what are you doing, man? You really fell off. You know, it takes a brave person. It takes a very brave person to bring themselves back, but I see it happen all the time, you know, when a person gets clocked. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, good luck. If you really want to get dismissed from the friend group. Um, but in that moment of clarity, you know, like when a person is clocked, I've seen it, I've been a part of it before. You know, I remember Geula Tali's senior year. What was that, 2023 also? And like you just like people sit there and they're just like crying and you know what's going on inside of them. Like you see that they're just like bringing themselves back and there's this like recognition of like what's happening to me. And then right after Shabbos they just go, I'm signing up for yeshiva. Like what am I doing, you know? It's like in that moment of clarity they realize what's being asked of them. I've degraded myself and had bad character traits and terrible nonsense. How can I sever myself and the roots of my forefathers, the Jewish soul, from within me, from its source and its life and holiness, and throw myself into the pit of poisonous snakes, a place of ruin and death, Rahman al His entire being will recoil and tremble with all his strength. He will shake his soul and body from the mud of the snake that have enwrapped him, and he will resolve from them on to choose a life of purity and divine holiness. That's why a good Farbrengen hits, you know? When a person like goes and cries to the Rebbe and they're like, I've been just so lost and messed up, you know what I mean? It's nice. I do get voice notes, like, you know, sometimes where people have been so distant and then they finally get back to that place and they're just like, what am I doing? It's very hard because nobody wants to live with that shame. To see where I was, to see where I am today, where I wanted to be. I spoke a big game. You know, it's a very hard thing. It requires a lot of bravery to do it. But again, that's the value of inspiration. You get inspired because it gives you the strength to do that which you're not normally able to do, especially when you're in the thrones of the Yetzer Hara. So last page 175. On the days that you will learn well and daven with kavanah the best of your ability, at those times when you come a bit closer to holiness, don't you, Jewish youth, feel ashamed of yourself and the silly things that you sometimes do? Aren't they disgusting in your eyes? And isn't it easier for you to control and strengthen yourself? That's what we meant when we said you need to elevate yourself. It's not an addition that this an exclusive domain of the greater tzaddikim. Rather, every single person, whatever his condition, must elevate himself at least from time to time. And what is he talking about? He's talking about the two things that we started this chapter off with. If you know what gets you clocked, if you know what your inspiration is, if you say to yourself, listen, me going and davening at the beach at sunrise really, really wakes me up. When you're in a rut and you feel like I just got to get out of this, I got to elevate myself. Know the things that need to happen. What is it that gets me all lit up? Whatever those things are, those need to be in your arsenal that when you are struggling and down, you say to yourself, it's been too long since I've X, Y, and Z. Sometimes when you stay away too long, then it can almost have the adverse effect, right? If learning with your advisors was something that uplifted you, and then you cut them out and talk to them for 6 to 8 months, now you feel like a sense of shame and awkwardness when you want to reapproach them because it's like, oh my God, how did I sink this low? Don't let yourself sink that low. If you're in a rut, right? Rather than keep yourself away from it, elevate yourself. Know what it is that, and every person has to know that for themselves. What we said last week. You have to know what it is that inspires you, that you have in your arsenal, that when you're struggling, you're able to tap into and elevate yourself in the proper way. Likewise with the Kedusha, right? Again, the inspiration can help you increase Kedusha because without that, it makes it very difficult. It could make it very difficult. But that's where Hashem is going to meet you where you're at. That's where Hashem's going to meet you where you're at. You're feeling uninspired. Don't keep yourself away from those things. There is a method, there's a reason, there's a rhyme. A person has to be able to elevate themselves. If a person is sitting around for a seat to split, it's never going to happen. Hashem's not going to. Sometimes it does, honestly. No, sometimes it does. Sometimes, ever since that accident, you don't want it to go down that way, though. You want to be able to say, I have control of my own life. I'm struggling. I'm going to get back on the horse. I'm not going to wait for something to force my hand into some inspirational moment. I, as a Jew, and all of us, we have to have the ability to elevate ourselves, meaning to increase, to get inspired and increase our Kedusha. If we are able to do that effectively, then we can never be lost. Then we always have the ability to fight against the Yetzer Hara and make sure that it doesn't win. Easier said than done, but this is the challenge of life. This is literally our avoda that we're tasked with our entire life. It's Hashem should bless us that we should be successful in this trait, that we should have success, and we should never lose perspective, bigger picture perspective. Next week we'll dive into advice on spiritual elevation and self-improvement. I'm going to continue a little bit more abstract as we venture on, but Mirz Hashem, it's a big chapter. We'll get to, hopefully we'll get there. Probably not. We probably won't finish the book, but we'll try. We'll try our best. Anyway, any questions, any thoughts?
Yeah, Sarah Chaya, what's the emoji? I think Rihanna can't speak because she's at little baby's house.
Nice. Um,
Cake, cake emoji.
Cake. I like the full cake or over Haley's birthday, or like the slice of cake emoji. Either or. Lou, lol, lol. Okay. Anyway, shkayach.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
guys. Think
Good night.
well. Laila
No, I'm not
tov.
leaving. I'm just saying bye on the call. I'm staying. Bye.